This week, I thought instead of looking at kind of like a media thing, I'd try and focus on something from the real world. So this episode is all about why I love running. So I'm not entirely sure when I first started running. I think it was sort of around my early 20s, and when I first started, I didn't really go into it with the intention of running at all. I think the running thing kind of came about just because I went out for a walk one night. I think my parents had gone away for a week, and I'm one of those people who doesn't really stay in sync ever, so if I have no reason to get up, I don't tend to sleep all day and then stay up all night. I just decided, right, I'm going to go out for a late night walk. So at this point, I didn't have any intention to run, so I'm walking around in probably some really oversized baggy jeans, because that was kind of what I wore then. I had big clumpy sort of Van shoes on, and probably a hoodie of some kind. And I remember just going for a walk. I probably walked a couple of miles, and then just thinking, I haven't run for forever. I never run anymore. And it's not that I ever really did, because as a kid I wasn't really into sports. I was the nerd at school. I was always on the B teams for football and things like that. I did kind of enjoy sport though, but I was just never good at it. But then as you sort of leave school, the opportunity to actually run or sprint or do anything just massively disappears. I mean, when do you have the time to do that? And as I was walking along the street, I just sort of thought, well, it's late at night and no one can see me. I'll just sort of sprint to the end of this road and see if I still can. So I got to the end of the road and I was absolutely dead from what I can remember. I mean, anybody who goes running will know if you haven't been for a long time, then it's pretty hard to do that first initial bit again. Well, I hadn't run for probably about 5 years or something at this point. But just that little sprint was really enjoyable, and I don't know, it kind of got into my head somehow. I didn't think like, oh wow, I need to do this again. But it got under the skin, because I went for a walk the next night and had another little run, and this time I think I tried to pace it a bit more so I could go further. And I must have looked insane, because like I say, I've got this massive thick hoodie on, I've got these big clumpy shoes on, I'm running around in big baggy jeans. Luckily it's the middle of the night again, so no one can see me. But I just had a really fun time, so then I'm not sure when, maybe a couple of days later, I just went and did it again. Now at this point, I definitely don't have a smartphone. There's no real way of sort of tracking runs, there's no running apps and things like that. But I discovered that I could use Google Maps and sort of draw on the route that I'd taken. So I just had to memorize where I'd been, and then once I got it home from the run, I would draw it all on and measure how far I'd been. And I think what really got me into the running at the beginning was that I'd always been quite bad at sport, but suddenly I was doing this thing that I thought I was doing really well at, and I don't have those sort of speeds or records anymore, so I'm not sure how fast I was going. I don't think I was going quickly, but I was doing some distances. I remember on one time I ran 12 miles, which now I feel like I'm back into running again at the moment in my life, and I definitely couldn't run 12 miles. The problem was though, and if you're listening to this and you go running, you've probably guessed what is about to happen, because I'm running in completely flat, hard shoes. So one night I go out for a run and wreck my Achilles. I think it was probably about 6 or 8 months later before I could run again. And I hadn't been running for that long when I got that injury, so I didn't really miss it. It wasn't something that I was desperate to go back to or anything. It just felt like, oh, that was a thing I did for a bit and now it's over. But then I can't remember the exact timing of this, but I think my Achilles had healed and I'd never really gone back to running. And I started going through a breakup from a long-term relationship, and I think I just had more free time and I maybe, wanted to get out and clear my head a bit. So I thought, oh, I'll go running again, but maybe this time I'll buy some running shoes. And I think that's when I really started getting into running properly. I eventually entered a half marathon, so that was the first of just 2 competitions that I've ever entered for running. As I say, I'd just gone through a breakup, so I had quite a lot of time on my hands. It gave me a sort of distraction. I think I managed to do the half marathon in about 1 hour 58 minutes, something like that. I was really happy with that time. One thing for a lot of the sort of start of me running was that I didn't really set any goals. I didn't massively try to improve on speeds and things. It was more just about getting out there and, just like I say, clearing my head and just doing something different. But I was really proud of myself for finishing that half marathon. It might sound, to people who run a lot, a half marathon probably isn't that big a deal. people who don't run at all, you probably just think, oh, it's only running, who cares? But for the few who are maybe somewhere in the middle at my kind of bad level of running, half marathons are really difficult. I did nearly give up, and I did nearly pass out at one point, but there's something really, really enjoyable and horrible at the same time about pushing yourself to kind of that physical limit. And this is kind of a recurring thing with me in running, is it's this thing about really pushing yourself. And I think that the half marathon was the first time I really did that, because before then I wasn't massively focused on beating my best time or going the greatest distance. It was like a release more than anything. But I remember doing the half marathon and suddenly feeling quite competitive, because I wasn't running on my own at night anymore. I was running in the day with thousands of people around me. And suddenly I wanted to sprint even more that last little bit. And I wanted to, just beat that one or two people who had been near me the whole race and managed to keep up with them. And yeah, it was an amazing feeling to finish it. But the problem was that once again, I managed to injure myself doing it. And when I recovered from that injury, my life was in a completely different place again. The breakup that I'd been going through that sort of got me really into running, I ended up getting back together with that person. I got a full-time job as well, and I just lost the sort of desire and the time really to go running anymore. And it wasn't until quite a few years later when I went through another breakup with the same person, and at this point I was also living in Scotland, that suddenly I wanted to run again. And I think that this is probably the real reason that I really love running. I mean, I like the competitiveness, and I really like the pushing your kind of body to past that point that you feel like you should be able to go. But it's got to be this. It's like, I'm not sure if it's really looking back with nostalgia, but just looking back over all these times where I've really been into running, it's all been to get through sort of quite difficult periods of my life. And it's really great to just have that kind of thing to focus on and that thing to escape to. In a way, it doesn't make sense. Like, I've escaped from bad things into video games before, and the good thing about that is that you kind of go into another world. The same with films, you go into this other world and you just have a few hours to not have to think. But with running, it's almost the opposite. It's a lot of time to think about stuff, but it's a great way to kind of deal with it and go through it all. And I don't know the mechanics behind it, I don't know if the physical side of it sort of helps somehow, but it just always sort of worked for me. So at this point, I'm now living in Dundee, and I had quite a lot of friends there because of the kind of job I had. We all worked on a big team, we hung out together outside of work and things, so that was good. But running was just kind of like this little solitary thing that I could go off and do away from everybody. Also, it was a great way to explore. I do think that if you ever move somewhere new, going out running's great. It's maybe not so necessary now with Google Maps and things like that. You can kind of look at your local area and find out where everything is. But I would find with walking, I would kind of see a road, but it was really long, and I'd think, oh, I don't want to walk all the way down there just to find out that it's a dead end or there's nothing worth seeing. But if you're going out running regularly, you can just take all different routes, and because you're running, nothing really takes that long. So you can just sort of really get to know the place that you live in a bit better, and maybe find some roads that you never would have gone down. And also just like see where you live at weird times. Like, I used to do a lot of running at night, especially when I was in Scotland. I used to work the late shift, so I could be going out at kind of midnight and running till 1 or 2 a.m. sometimes, and then come home, just get a shower, go straight to sleep, and get up for work the next day. And that time in Dundee, that was sort of the second time in my life I think that I was really, really into running. And I was running maybe 3 or 4 times a week at some points. And I wasn't doing the same sort of distances as before. So when I decided to try and do another competitive race, this time I entered a 10k. Here's a little pro tip for anybody who is running or thinking about going running. Don't eat a whole box of brownies for breakfast before you do a 10k when you haven't run for 2 months because of an injury, and then get really competitive and try and outrun your friend only to end up vomiting into a field. So that was my 10k race. And after that 10k race, I think I took a break from running again. The only other thing I did was for the job that I'm currently working at, which is actually for a charity. And in 2012, a team of us took part in this challenge for the 2012 Olympics. Now, this challenge was set up by a local gym, and they actually gave everybody taking part a free gym membership. So that was my first sort of experience of going to a gym. So one thing I haven't really talked about yet with running is music. So I've always been one of those people who listens to music whenever they travel, whenever they go on long walks, and running's no exception. I can run without music, but I definitely run better when listening to music. I think this is another thing that I really just love about running, is that it's one of the kind of main times now that I get to listen to music. I find when you live with somebody else, it's much harder to just put music on, and if you put headphones on, it kind of feels like you're ignoring them, and so running's a great way to just escape to that. And one thing that I find really fascinating about running is I can be listening to music that I've had on my MP3 player for 10 years now, and all of a sudden a certain song will just suddenly mean so much more, or I'll suddenly actually hear the lyrics for the first time, and I know that's maybe the case with music in general. You don't have to be running to do that, but I really have that connection to music in my life now with running, so it just makes me love running that extra bit more. So back at the gym to do this challenge, I was listening to a lot of music, and just one time I just remember that I was listening to, I think, Lose Yourself by Eminem. And again, something I love about running is that I listen to music that I would never have listened to normally. Like, as a teenager, I dabbled with Eminem and some rap music and things, but it wasn't really my kind of thing. I listened to a lot of sort of singer-songwriters and things like that. But when you go running, you often want sort of upbeat and high-tempo music, or music that really gets you pumped up. That song for me, although I cannot relate to it in any real-life situation, I just somehow get absorbed by it if I'm running. So I remember being at the gym and I'm listening to this song and I'm really going for it. I'm sprinting away on the treadmill. For people who don't go to gyms, one thing that I thought was weird is that no one seems to really be trying that hard. I felt like I was the only one really sprinting on these things and really going for it. Everybody just kind of shows up, I think, so that they can say they've been. So I'd got quite used to not really paying attention to anyone else in the gym. I didn't look around because I knew they were probably giving me weird looks. I was just there, looking forwards, out the window, sprinting along, listening to this Eminem song, and suddenly I got a little tap on the arm. And it freaked me out, and I looked to the side, and it was one of the gym people, and the gym had been shut for 20 minutes, and I was the only one there, and they couldn't wait any longer for me to leave. And it was really embarrassing, but I don't know, I think I only really wanted to put that little story into this because I think that just shows like how absorbing running can be and how much you can just go off into your head, really get away from the world and really just get absorbed by the music and absorbed by thought. And the fact that for 20 minutes I had just been running like a loon on this machine and all the staff had just been stood watching me, waiting for me to give up, desperately hoping that I would go home. It's always just given me a little chuckle. So a lot of that was stuff that happened in the past. I mean, that challenge was in 2012, but since then I haven't really got into a proper flow with running. I have run on and off, but I've never quite had the same desire to run. I think a lot of the reason for that is because in the past few years it's always been more of a fitness thing or a weight loss thing rather than, like say in the past it was kind of getting away from breakups or trying to sort my head out with like new jobs and new places to live and things. And then a couple of years ago I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which a lot of people probably haven't heard of. It's quite similar to Crohn's, if you've heard of that. That's more of a well-known one. And this isn't about getting sympathy or anything. I mean, I have a very mild version of this thing, and people who have it bad have it a really horrid time. I've been really lucky with it. But for quite a while, I didn't think I was able to run. Without going into too much detail, colitis basically gives you a lot of diarrhea, it gives you a lot of stomach cramps and pains and nausea. And a few times that I tried to do sort of exercise after getting it, I would get quite sick. Now the funny thing is that after about a year and a half, I discovered that a lot of my symptoms came from the certain types of food that I was eating. And it just happened to be that the couple of times I tried exercising, I had eaten that food either that morning or that day before. So the running did very little. So I think it was about August 2016 when I realised that I could run again. And at first it was brilliant because it was like a brand new thing again, a brand new reason to run. I'd had all these horrible things in the past things that I was trying to escape. This time I was trying to beat something. It was, I was trying to see if I had any new limits, if I could push past them, how quickly I could build up, if I was going to get sick if I did. And I was excited to run again. Everything was a new challenge. Everything was a new record for me. It was almost like I'd started afresh. But now it's the start of 2017, and I've kind of worked out that physically I'm not as good as I was when I was in my early 20s. I mean, I'm 30 now, but I don't think that the colitis itself actually holds me back in any way. So now I'm at this strange place again where, I'm in a really good place in my life. I'm in a really happy relationship. I'm getting married this year. I don't have anything to try and escape relationship-wise anymore. And I don't really have that sort of like fighting back against the illness sort of drive that I had. And I don't have that initial thing of just running being really new and fun and interesting. And although it's still a great sort of escape for listening to music, it's just not really enough anymore. I mean, I've gone through all these reasons as to why I loved running, but I'm not sure why I still do love running. And so to end this podcast, I think the only way I can really do it is to sort of try and find a new love for running, try and find a new reason to love going out there. So I've decided that I'm going to sign up this year to do a half marathon again. I'm not even going to record a second line where I say a 10k so I can edit that in, because I could do a 10k, I can run 10k's now and that's easy, but I need a challenge, I need something bigger than that. I'm not going to go crazy. I mean, I need to be able to walk down the aisle in October, so I'm not going to do a marathon. But I think if I really pushed myself, I could do a half marathon again. It's going to be hard. I mean, I don't have a lot of free time, and this might be insane when I've got a lot of other stuff to do in terms of organising the wedding and jobs and everything else. But I need to do something or I will stop running again, and I don't want to, because it's brilliant and I do really love it when I do it, and I need that drive to do it. So yeah, you heard it here first. 2017 half marathon. It's happening, hopefully.